One of the most controversial concepts within the high-performance world currently is the sports SUV. Ferrari, Bentley, Rolls-Royce, Lamborghini, Maserati, Porsche, of course Porsche with the Cayenne being way before most of the others, these are still controversial cars nearly 20 years after they started to enter the scene. But there's one which is even more niche than that and far, far less successful, and that is the high-performance minivan. Because as utilitarian as SUVs can be, you could strongly argue that a minivan is even more utilitarian, because there's a different price bracket, a different kind of buyer, and that inherently brings up different issues. Plus, from a design perspective, how do you really pull off a high-performance minivan without it looking awkward or bobble-headed? Now, some have tried and some have succeeded. We've talked about quite a few of them in this series. One of the OG episodes was for the Citroën Zara Picasso Cup, a pretty badass-looking car in my opinion. Of course, more recently, we talked about one of the most famous examples of a fast minivan, if not the most beloved example, the Renault Espace F1, and even on a production scale, it actually has been done successfully a couple of times, probably most notably by Vauxhall, with the Zafira platform with the GSI and the VXR. But even Mercedes did it, and even though many R-Class owners would claim that it's an SUV, let's be honest, it really isn't. It's a luxury minivan. And as such, the R63 AMG is technically the fastest minivan you can buy, by a pretty huge margin. However, this could have been one of the best ones out there had it ever reached the production stage. Now, I know the first thought that people are going to have, before you even click on the video, is that this is the dumbest thing you've ever heard of. Why would anyone want a Maserati minivan? But then secondarily to that, the one thing that you always expect from Maserati is for it to look striking. Maybe not pretty in a conventional sense, but unique and eye-catching, and although you might say that about this car, I don't think many people would call it pretty. It is certainly unique though. Now, it was designed by Italdesign Gagaru, and he was inspired by a couple of other small, more boxy Italian concepts, such as the Lancia Mega Gamma and the Alfa Romeo Taxi, two pretty weird-looking cars in their own right, and he wanted to kind of do this idea before it was really a thing. And in effect, this idea is kind of what Mercedes did sort of right in the form of the R-Class, even though that's kind of a controversial car anyway. Now, this one was designed to be a luxury executive class minivan, a high-performance minivan as well, but something that really had that level of prestige. The Quattroporte is already a car that many politicians, many businessmen in Italy would use. So what about something with more space, more headroom, more of an upright driving position, more of kind of an airport taxi style machine, again like the R-Class would be? Now what they did wasn't just slap some weird body onto an existing Alfa Romeo chassis and call it a day. They actually tried to make this a cool idea. And the engine was a good start. Now this is a front engine car. Interestingly, it has a couple of things which Maserati wasn't really doing at the time. Of course, they love to use their F1-style Cambia Corsa gearboxes, which this did not have. It has a 6-speed auto mounted up on the dash like a modern minivan, but with a Tiptronic selector as well, more Porsche style at the time, and it was 4-wheel drive, which not that many minivans are. Again, pretty interesting concept, and it could have made it pretty quick off the line and pretty grippy as well. But then there's the engine. They fitted it with the bi-turbo 3.2-litre V8 from the 3200 GT. So this minivan actually sounds pretty damn fantastic and puts out 370 horsepower. So it's a bi-turbo 4-wheel drive Tiptronic 370 horsepower Maserati minivan. It may not be the prettiest thing around, but it certainly wouldn't have been slow. Now, of course, it wouldn't have been as quick as the 3200, but it would have been definitely hot hatch territory of the time, which if you think about it is kind of the bar that you should aim for in any fast minivan, and most of the good ones have at least matched that level, like the aforementioned Zafira, and the Mercedes being way faster than most minivans. Now, in terms of this car's construction, although it took the idea of a luxury minivan in a general sense and ran with it, it did a few things which were a bit more odd. The interior style being one of them, mostly brown suede with some glossy black accenting, I must admit, I kind of love the interior on this thing, as weird as it looks, but then again, I'm also the person who bought quilted brown mats for a Touareg, so my tastes are probably more aligned with this car than most people's are. But then in terms of the construction of how doors open, how the boot space, the luggage space works, it was just kind of Italian. Or actually kind of French in some ways. See, the rear doors were electronically operated, as you'll see in some of the images, which was kind of ahead of its time. You know, Peugeot would do a similar thing with models like the 1007, I believe, even a smaller example of a vehicle like this. And the boot was probably the weirdest thing of all, because in terms of its design, this car was designed to be less of a minivan and more of a larger level saloon with a hatchback shape. It kind of achieves that. But then the boot isn't a hatchback. And again, as you'll see from some of the included images, the boot is a little bit unfortunate because even though it is practical, it's kind of awkward at the same time. It operates in a similar way to like the luggage loading dock, if you will, on the side of a coach where you put your bags in and then step onto the coach. The boot is like that. It's not a hatchback, it's a notchback, like a sedan or a saloon would have, like the Quattroporte has, for example. So just weird and oddball choices made all over the place. Completely different gearbox, completely different drivetrain, completely different access to luggage and passengers. And despite its size, the performance would have been good. I mean, we know if nothing else, it would have been striking to look at. It would have been far more exclusive in this category of the market, and with that engine, it would have sounded pretty amazing too, but it was a big vehicle. So of course the performance would have been limited to some degree by that, with the four-wheel drive kind of making up for some of the slack there. Now, it was 5 meters long, 1.6 meters tall, and just under 2 meters wide. So a fairly large vehicle, and it's not like it's a 7-seater at the end of the day, so it wouldn't have been the most practical thing around, but for what its intended purpose was, controversial looks aside, it kind of does tick a lot of the boxes. It has the badge prestige, it has the performance, it has the sound, it certainly has the exclusivity, you can bet it would have had the price, and it kind of does put effort in where you could have said, it's just going to be a show car, nobody's going to care, let's just make it like a rolling shell with no interior or something, but they actually did put effort into this thing. And controversial styling aside, I actually quite like this car. Even with its styling, I would go so far as to say that if I could afford to buy this thing and find the concept version, I probably would, sacrilegious as that may sound to Maserati. I would totally buy this thing. I'd use it as a daily. I'd take it to car shows because there's just something about some of these cars which appeals to me in a weird, twisted, oddball kind of way. The idea of a Maserati minivan, of course, never came to fruition, but fast forward a couple of decades on from when this made its debut at the 2000 Geneva Motor Show, well, we now have not one but two Maserati SUVs. We have diesel Maseratis, and there are more Maseratis that are not high-performance cars in their range than there are performance cars. So maybe the idea of something a bit different from the brand isn't as crazy as it initially seems. I personally believe that a vehicle like this could have even helped Maserati to change up their formula a little bit earlier, as the Cayenne did for Porsche, bringing a massive amount of success to the brand. And just look how well Porsche is doing now, from those roots around 20 years ago. So to me, this car represents what could have been. Would it have been to everyone's taste? Absolutely not. But no Maserati is to everyone's taste. That's kind of what they do. Ultimately, though, that's it for this episode. Of course, if you're new to the series of Unsung Heroes, and this is the first one you've checked out, there are plenty more to watch here on the channel. And of course, if you'd like to vote on this one being one of your favourites, click on the link over to the Discord server for the channel, and there's a voting section there when you can upvote all of your favourite episodes. But until next time, I'll see you then, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.